Welcome, my beautiful family. Prepare yourselves for a story that will pull at your heartstrings and challenge your notions of loyalty and justice. She adjusted the delicate lace of her dress, a smile fixed, while across the room, the woman who held her husband's future and his child beamed under the adoring gaze of everyone she knew. Amara, her hands clasped tightly over a womb that felt increasingly barren, watched the flickering candlelight dance across the faces of her husband's family. They were laughing, toasting, their joy a deafening echo in the cavernous, expensively decorated living room. But the celebration wasn't for her, nor for the future she desperately craved. It was for her. Sienna, radiant and round, held court on a velvet chaise, her laughter tinkling like wind chimes, a sound that grated on Amara's soul. Amara, a respected architect, had built bridges and skylines, but her own marriage, once a soaring edifice, now lay in ruins, painstakingly hidden beneath a facade of polite smiles and designer gowns. Her flaw, perhaps, was her unwavering loyalty, a quiet strength mistaken for complacency. The longing for a child, for the family she envisioned, was a raw, aching wound beneath her composed exterior. Miles away, in a cramped, cluttered apartment that smelled faintly of old books and ambition, David hunched over a laptop, the glow illuminating the dark circles under his eyes. He was a brilliant but struggling journalist, chasing stories that mattered, but often at the cost of his personal life. His world was one of stark truths and uncomfortable questions, a stark contrast to the gilded cage Amara inhabited. His emotional need was for authenticity, for a life lived without pretense, a stark reaction to his own upbringing filled with superficial pleasantries. He scrolled through a local society blog, a cynical sneer playing on his lips, until a familiar face, radiant and smiling, stopped him cold. It was Sienna, his estranged sister, the subject of a lavish baby shower, an event he hadn't been invited to, of course. His phone buzzed, a message from his editor. Big society scoop needed. Anything on the Sinclair empire? Rumors are flying. He glanced back at Sienna's picture, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Their paths, unbeknownst to them, were about to violently intersect. The air in the ballroom was thick with the cloying scent of lilies and champagne, a nauseating cocktail for Amara. The surprise baby shower for Sienna had reached its crescendo. Arthur, Amara's husband, stood by Sienna's side, his arm possessively around her waist, his gaze fixed on her with a tenderness Amara hadn't seemed directed at herself in years. The flash of a camera captured their idyllic image, the happy, soon-to-be family. Amara felt a tremor start deep within her, a seismic shift that threatened to shatter her carefully constructed composure. This wasn't just a party, it was a public declaration, an obliteration of her very existence in Arthur's life. As Sienna unwrapped a tiny silver rattle, cooing with delight, Arthur leaned in, whispering something intimate that made Sienna blush and giggle. It was then, in that precise, agonizing moment, that Amara saw it, a flicker of pure, unadulterated happiness on Arthur's face that screamed louder than any shouted confession. It was a happiness she could never give him, a future she could never be a part of. A single, crystalline tear tracked a path down Amara's cheek, unnoticed in the celebratory chaos. Her heart, which had been a tightly wound spring for months, snapped. A cold, resolute calm settled over her. The decision, sharp and irreversible, solidified in her mind. This charade would end tonight. Miles away, David clicked through the online gallery of the baby shower, his reporter's instinct tingling. He recognized the opulent venue, the prominent guests, all key players in the city's elite. And there, repeatedly, was Sienna, his estranged sister, alongside Arthur Sinclair, the renowned real estate mogul. He zoomed in on one particular photo, Arthur, Sienna, and a glimpse of Amara in the background, her face a mask of polite agony. David's fingers froze on the keyboard. Amara Sinclair. the wife, the current wife. A cold wave of understanding washed over him, quickly followed by a surge of journalistic adrenaline. This wasn't just society gossip. This was a story of betrayal, of public humiliation hidden beneath a veil of luxury. As Sienna unwrapped a tiny silver rattle, cooing with delight, Arthur leaned in, whispering something intimate that made Sienna blush and giggle. It was then, in that precise, agonizing moment, that Amara saw it, a flicker of pure, unadulterated happiness on Arthur's face that screamed louder than any shouted confession. It was a happiness she could never give him, a future she could never be a part of. A single, crystalline tear tracked a path down Amara's cheek, unnoticed in the celebratory chaos. Her heart, which had been a tightly wound spring for months, snapped. A cold, resolute calm settled over her. The decision, sharp and irreversible, solidified in her mind. This charade would end tonight. Miles away, David clicked through the online gallery of the baby shower, his reporter's instinct tingling. He recognized the opulent venue, the prominent guests, all key players in the city's elite. And there, repeatedly, was Sienna, his estranged sister, alongside Arthur Sinclair, the renowned real estate mogul. He zoomed in on one particular photo, Arthur, Sienna, and a glimpse of Amara in the background, her face a mask of polite agony. David's fingers froze on the keyboard. Amara Sinclair, the wife, the current wife. A cold wave of understanding washed over him, quickly followed by a surge of journalistic adrenaline. This wasn't just society gossip. This was a story of betrayal, of public humiliation hidden beneath a veil of luxury. He remembered the hushed whispers about Arthur's affairs, stories his own sister, Sienna, had always dismissed as malicious rumors. Now, staring at the undeniable evidence of their celebratory intimacy, a different kind of pain clenched his gut, not just for the story, but for the stark, ugly truth of his sister's choices, and the potential fallout for the woman in the background. His cynicism warred with a surprising flash of empathy for the invisible wife. Amara retreated to a quiet corner of the ballroom, her phone clutched in a trembling hand. The divorce papers, crisp and final, were already drafted, a testament to months of quiet, agonizing preparation. Her finger hovered over the send button, ready to dispatch them to her lawyer. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee, to disappear, to avoid the inevitable explosion. A small, insidious voice in her mind, the voice of societal expectation, whispered about the scandal, the whispers, the collapse of her carefully cultivated image. She could still walk away quietly, let the lawyers handle it, avoid the public spectacle. The tension in her shoulders was a physical ache, a manifestation of her internal war. Her pride, a shield she had worn for years, urged her to maintain dignity, to not give Arthur or Sienna the satisfaction of seeing her break. Yet, the image of Arthur's unbridled joy, so carelessly displayed, was a brand on her soul, refusing to let her simply fade away. David slammed his laptop shut, the dull thud echoing in his small apartment. The story, the raw, explosive truth of it, felt too personal, too close to home. Sienna was his sister, flawed as she was. Publishing this would expose her, not just Arthur. He paced, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. His journalistic integrity demanded he pursue the truth, expose the hypocrisy of the city's elite. But a deep-seated loyalty, a ghost of a family bond he thought long severed, held him back. He tried to rationalize it away. It's not my fight, it's just gossip. But the image of Amara's devastated face in the background of the photo, the quiet anguish in her eyes, gnawed at him. His phone vibrated with a text from his editor. Got anything on Sinclair yet? Heard there's a big bash tonight. The external pressure mounted, pushing him towards the story, even as his conscience urged him to look away. He felt caught between his professional ambition and a deeply buried familial connection. How are Amara and David's internal struggles resonating with you? Do you feel their conflict? Let me know in the comments. Amara slipped out of the ballroom, the suffocating opulence replaced by the cool, crisp night air. She needed to breathe, to think, before she took the irreversible step. Her plan was to serve the papers at the end of the night, a final, public act of reclaiming her narrative. As she fumbled for her car keys and her clutch, a sudden downpour erupted, turning the manicured estate grounds into a slick, shimmering expanse. Her expensive heels sank slightly into the soft earth as she hurried towards the parking lot. Just then, a tire burst with a loud hiss, sending her car lurching violently. She wrestled with the steering wheel, finally bringing the car to a halt against a decorative stone pillar. A wave of frustrated tears, hot and angry, finally escaped. Stranded, soaked, and utterly alone, she saw a flicker of headlights approaching. A beat-up sedan pulled alongside her disabled luxury vehicle, and a man emerged, carrying an umbrella, his face obscured by the rain. David, having finally succumbed to his editor's relentless pings, had driven out to the Sinclair estate, hoping to catch a glimpse of the aftermath, to find a human angle for his story. He hadn't expected the sudden deluge, or to find a high-end sedan wrecked against a pillar, its lone occupant looking utterly distraught. He recognized the car from the photos, Amara Sinclair's. Despite his initial cynical intentions, his innate human decency kicked in. He grabbed his umbrella and a spare emergency kit from his trunk. He approached cautiously, noting the woman's expensive, now drenched gown and the palpable aura of shattered elegance. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Amara, startled, looked up, her eyes, though swollen with unshed tears, holding a fierce, raw vulnerability that surprised him. She was reluctant, wary, but stranded and clearly in distress. They were stuck, bound by a broken tire and a shared, silent understanding that the night had gone terribly wrong for both of them. As David efficiently assessed the damaged tire, Amara leaned against her car, the initial shock giving way to a weary resignation. It's just one more thing tonight," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She didn't recognize him, and his quiet competence was a strange comfort. The rain lessened to a drizzle, and in the dim light of his car's hazard flashers, she saw the intensity in his eyes. Something about him, perhaps his unpolished sincerity, nudged her to speak. "My husband, he's inside, celebrating his mistress's baby shower." The words tumbled out, raw and painful. She watched his reaction, expecting judgment, but saw only a grim nod of understanding. I just wanted a family," she continued, her voice breaking. "We tried for years. Failed IVF treatments, miscarriages. It just broke us. Or it broke him." A flashback flickered, her in a sterile clinic, eyes brimming with hope, then despair. Arthur's hand on her shoulder, distant even then. David listened, his own internal struggle silenced by the weight of her confession. He knew her husband was his sister's lover, and the baby was his niece or nephew. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. The woman before him, vulnerable and heartbroken, was not just a society wife. She was a woman whose deepest desire had been cruelly denied. I'm sorry," he said, the words simple but genuine. "My sister, she's inside too. Sienna." He watched Amara's eyes widen in recognition, a new layer of pain etching itself onto her face. The revelation hung heavy between them, a sudden, undeniable connection born from shared pain and familial betrayal. He saw the shift from shock to a fragile understanding in her eyes. The mystery of his sister's involvement and his own moral dilemma intensified. Their connection, fragile and unexpected, strengthened under the harsh light of their intersecting truths. He felt a sudden, profound responsibility to her, a stranger united by a shared, heartbreaking reality. David, having determined the car wasn't safely drivable, offered Amara a ride, not back to the party, but to a quiet diner he knew. She accepted, too drained to argue, and the silence in his car was companionable rather than awkward. Over lukewarm coffee and stale pastries in the deserted, fluorescent-lit diner, the last vestiges of Amara's composure finally crumbled. She spoke of her marriage, not with bitterness, but with a profound sadness for what it once promised. She recounted the years of quiet desperation, the hopes for a child, the gradual erosion of trust as Arthur became more distant, more secretive. I kept telling myself it was stress, the business, she confessed, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her. I built so many walls around us, trying to protect what was left. David listened intently, the sharp edges of his cynicism softening. He saw past the designer clothes and the society name to the raw, hurting woman beneath. He found himself sharing glimpses of his own fractured family, his estrangement from Sienna, the quiet resentment he harbored for the superficial world they both inhabited. He spoke of his own longing for truth, for connection that wasn't transactional. A small, shared smile flickered between them when he recounted a particularly absurd incident from his cub reporter days. In that sterile diner, surrounded by the mundane, a fragile sense of peace settled. It was a shared vulnerability, a tacit understanding that transcended their different worlds. They found an unexpected comfort in each other's presence, a temporary haven from the storm of betrayal surrounding them. It felt like healing, a momentary reprieve from the pain. The unspoken promise of a genuine connection hung in the air, a whisper of hope in the quiet dawn. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in bruised purples and oranges as David pulled up to a modest hotel near Amara's architectural firm, a safe, quiet place away from the estate. Amara, feeling a strange lightness after their hours of conversation, was about to step out when David's phone buzzed with an insistent ring. It was his editor. "David, where the hell are you? I've got a tip-off on the Sinclair story, a big one. Arthur Sinclair's wife, Amara, is reportedly at the estate, acting erratically. There's talk of a public confrontation. We need you to confirm and get us the exclusive. This could make your career." David froze, his eyes darting from the phone to Amara, whose name had just been spoken with a casual, predatory eagerness. Amara heard it all. Her name, the erratically, the implication of her breakdown, and exclusive. The fragile trust she had just begun to place in him shattered into 1,000 pieces. She saw his eyes, the conflict, the journalist's hunger, warring with the unexpected empathy they had shared. "You were using me," she whispered, her voice dangerously quiet, devoid of the earlier sadness, replaced by a cold, cutting anger. All of it, the concern, the listening, just for your story. The betrayal felt sharper, more profound than Arthur's, precisely because it had come after a moment of true connection. She felt foolish, exposed, her vulnerability weaponized. "Is that why you were at the estate, David? To prey on the wreckage of my life?" Her words, though soft, were laced with venom, striking at his deepest insecurities about his profession. He tried to explain, to stammer about journalistic integrity, about not knowing, about his sister's involvement, but the words caught in his throat. He saw the doors slam shut behind her eyes, the walls she had let down rising higher and thicker than before. The bond, so delicately forged, was brutally destroyed. He watched her storm out of the car, leaving him alone with the bitter taste of his own compromised ethics and the crushing weight of his editor's triumphant voice on the phone. She had laid bare her soul, and he, unwittingly, had allowed it to be mined for a headline. In that moment, he questioned if he was capable of any genuine connection, if his ambition would always taint everything he touched. Amara checked into the hotel, the sterile white walls mirroring the emptiness she felt. She had been betrayed twice in one night, by her husband and by the man who had offered her a moment of solace. The divorce papers, still in her bag, felt heavy, a symbol not just of an ending, but of a deep, pervasive loneliness. Her initial plan to serve them at the baby shower had been an act of defiance, a reclaiming of power. Now she simply wanted to disappear. The thought of facing Arthur, of facing anyone, filled her with dread. But beneath the despair, a flicker of that earlier resolve returned. She was Amara Sinclair, the architect who built structures that stood the test of time. She would not crumble. She took out the divorce papers, her fingers tracing the legal jargon. This was still her choice. She could proceed with quiet dignity, or she could make a statement, not for revenge, but for herself. The choice was not about Arthur or Sienna, but about reclaiming her own narrative, her own worth. David sat in his car, the engine off, the silence amplifying the shame. He had called his editor back, declining to write the story about Amara, citing a conflict of interest. His editor had been furious, threatening his job, but David hadn't cared. The image of Amara's shattered eyes was burned into his mind. He had failed her, failed himself. He saw now how his ambition had blinded him, how he had almost sacrificed a nascent, real connection for a fleeting scoop. He thought of Sienna, of their fractured relationship, and how easily he could have contributed to another's pain by exploiting it. He knew he had to make amends, not just for Amara, but for the kind of man he wanted to be. He looked at his phone, hesitating. Would she even speak to him? Could he bridge the chasm his perceived betrayal had created? Pride urged him to let it go, to retreat, but the genuine empathy he had felt in the diner was a persistent ache. With a deep breath, he typed out a message, simple and sincere, asking if he could just talk to her, to explain, to apologize. He sent it, then waiting, every second stretching into an eternity, his heart pounding a slow, tense rhythm. What do you think of this pivotal moment, my friends? Will Amara respond to David's apology, or is their connection irreversibly broken? Share your thoughts below. Hours crawled by. Amara sat on the hotel bed, the divorce papers on the nightstand beside her, untouched. David's message had arrived, a raw, honest apology, devoid of journalistic pretense, acknowledging his error and his regret. It wasn't an excuse, but an admission of his own conflict. She reread it, a different kind of warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but a flicker of understanding, a testament to the genuine connection they had shared before it shattered. The initial anger, the feeling of being used, had softened into a weary acceptance of human fallibility, including her own. She thought of the woman she was before this night, the woman who would have silently borne her pain. But the woman who emerged from the ruins of her marriage, forged in the fires of betrayal and unexpected connection, was different. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city awakening, a city she had helped build. This was her city, her life, and she would reclaim it on her own terms. Later that morning, Amara arrived back at the Sinclair estate, not to an empty house, but to Arthur, Sienna, and a small, flustered group of family members milling about. The party's opulent decorations now looked garish, a stark reminder of the previous night's grand delusion. Arthur, looking surprisingly haggard, saw her enter. "Amara, where have you been? We were worried," he began, but she held up a hand, silencing him. Her gaze swept over Sienna, who looked down, unable to meet her eyes, then settled firmly on Arthur. She pulled the meticulously folded divorce papers from her clutch. "I was finding my way," she stated, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of tremor. "And now I have." She handed the papers to Arthur, who stared at them as if they were a foreign language. "Consider this served. I wish you both the happiness you clearly found." Her eyes met Sienna's for a fleeting moment, a silent message passing between the two women, one of loss, one of quiet resolve. As Amara turned to leave, her gaze fell upon a single wilting lily on a nearby table, a poignant echo of the suffocating scent that had filled the ballroom hours before. But this time, it held no power over her. She stepped out into the crisp morning air, a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. Her phone vibrated. It was David. "I'm outside," the message read. "Just wanted to see if you're okay. No story, no questions. Just okay?" She paused, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She took a deep breath, the scent of fresh rain filling her lungs, and walked towards the waiting car. It wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a reconnection not just with another, but with herself, finally choosing vulnerability and truth over the hollow comfort of pretense. What a journey, my incredible online family! Amara found her strength, served her truth, and chose a path towards unexpected connection. What do you think about her final decision? Do you believe she and David will find healing together? Share your hopes and thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going.